All right, since I'm elected, I guess, self-appointed, whichever to start. I jotted down some notes ahead of time, just so if I got a little too nervous, I wouldn't get all befuddled and forget what I was supposed to say. You know, when you get to our age, you tend to have those senior moments, you know. So, but, you know, we're really on this earth just for a short time, actually, when you think of eternity. You know, for some of us, it's going to be longer than others. And I like to think of this time as a journey from the day we are born to the day we die. In the early part of the journey, our parents make most of the decisions for us. But as time goes on, we need to start to make some decisions on our own. And by the time we reach the age where you are today as young adults, we have some pretty big decisions to make. For one thing, we have to decide, you know, how are we going to support ourselves on this journey? In other words, we have to decide on a career, like being a nurse, which Dorset was, or a lawyer, or a secretary, or a teacher, or factory worker, or just whatever. And another big decision we need to make is, are we going to make our journey alone, or am I going to look for a partner to travel this road down life's pathway? If I decide to have a partner, someone to travel with me, picking the right person to be your partner might be the biggest decision that you have to make in your whole life. You need to set some goals as to what you want out of life. And our goals shouldn't be about how much money can we make, how much prestige can we gain. Rather, I think we need to look for someone who will help you find joy and happiness, and someone you can feel that you can trust and walk hand in hand with to make sure that you will reach your final goal of your journey, which is heaven. Doris and I have been on our journey together now for over 51 years. Actually, our anniversary was just a couple of weeks ago, the 5th of November. And, but I believe it isn't the number of years that counts. You know, when we were growing up, if somebody celebrated their 50th anniversary, that was really quite a feat. Today we have couples celebrating 60, 65, 70. We know a couple of couples in Ottawa that have been married 70 years or more. But I don't think that number means as much as how we spend these years together. And talking about how we spend these years together, I heard a little story about a parish that was made up of entirely almost Italian immigrants. And once a month, the group of the older men would gather together with their pastor just to have some social time together. And one month as they came together, the pastor said, "Luigi, I hear you and your wife are going to be celebrating your 50th wedding anniversary." Luigi says, "Yeah, that we are." The pastor says, "Oh, how wonderful. How do you manage 50 years together?" "Well," Luigi says, "I try to treat her real nice. I buy her nice clothes, jewelry, and for our 25th anniversary, I even took her to Italy to visit her family." The pastor says, "Oh, that is so nice, Luigi. Have you got anything special planned for your 50th? He said, "Yeah, I think I go to get her back." So like I said, it's a little bit of how we spend those years together that as how many years? So 50 years can be awful miserable, I think, for some people, and some people it can be awful short time, but for us, I think the years have just really flown by, so.
Got any comments you want to make on that?
Beverly? Anybody?
Well, I was reminded when Harold was reading one, when our daughter got married she got married at UD, and Father Mark Coyne, our pastor from Ottawa, came down to Dayton to marry them. And I remember the gifts that he gave our daughter and her new husband. And the one was, he gave Jen, our daughter, we grew up on a farm, so he gave her a little plastic pig as a reminder of their marriage. And of course, she wondered what that was for. Well, that was to remind her to never forget where she came from. Her roots, right, her roots. And he gave Andre, her new husband, who grew up in Cincinnati. We grew up in the northern part of Ohio. Cincinnati, yeah, I hear somebody from there. And he gave him a pair of flip-flops. And that was a reminder that he should never walk behind our daughter Jen. He should never walk in front of her. But the idea was to walk hand in hand, side by side. And I thought, what a nice way to think of a marriage, walking side by side rather than one leading the other. Once in a while, it does come to the point where certain times in their life when one kind of needs to take charge and lead the other, and then the other one has to fall back sometimes. That's what I found in our marriage. But in general, if you walk side by side, like Father Mark talked about, walking hand in hand, side by side, like these guys are always holding hands to walking together, it's just a nice way to lead your life. Jillian had given us a couple little comments or little thoughts to think about, and she talked about the difference between dating and being married. Well, both of us, we were married 43 and a half years. Only. And when we were dating, of course, we all got dressed up to go out today. We probably, well, Doris said she always wore her high heels, and I always got dressed up to have a date, and we would only see each other really on those dates. Whereas nowadays, you know, I think it's kind of good that kids get a chance to see each other in the everyday life. Whereas I hardly ever saw him when he was dirty until we were married, literally. I mean, he was a farmer, but when we would go out, he'd clean himself up real nice. And I just didn't see him in everyday life. The way the kids are dating nowadays, in that way, I think is kind of good, that you get to see what kind of daily living they have, which I think is a good way to do it. Another thing that I was thinking about when we were on our way up here, we were talking about what we were going to talk about, and we were talking about God's plan for us. And many times, what God has in His mind isn't always ours. I read a book recently that this farmer married this wife, and their plans were to have 4 or 5 or 6 nice, healthy boys to help with the farm. Well, their boys were named, like Deb and Jill, and those. They didn't have these 4 or 5 boys. They had 5 girls instead. And sometimes God's plan is not always our plan. And many times, many times, what God has in mind for us turns out to be something wonderful that we certainly didn't have in mind for ourselves. So, somebody else wants to add something? You can do an analogy.
Okay. Well, I think we're supposed to be talking about dating, which you guys are interested in, where we can hardly remember when we were dating. Like Emily says, you know, we would just, when Emily went to UD and I was back in northern Ohio, we would get together maybe once or twice on a weekend, and we wouldn't converse, no texting, no cell phones, not very often. We led our lives, and then when we did get together, we had a lot of catching up to do, and we usually did that. I probably in the beginning probably dated for the wrong reasons, but I had a boat, and she could really ski, and boy, I wanted her in the boat. So that's how it all started. but then it evolves more and more, and you grow together. And if you're on the same journey, it's pretty easy to grow together. But if, as everybody knows, the divorce rate is about 50% or something like that, I don't know. But if you're pulling apart every day or contradicting each other, it probably is not a wise thing to even think about marriage. Because there's plenty of outside forces to try to distract you. Or not try to, but it's just there in the worldly things. So you have to get back to base one and keep connected. And as far as marriage, I think the analogy is jumping in a river. Sometimes the river goes fast, sometimes it goes slow. You never know what's around the next bend. But if you go with the flow and think of each other often, usually you reach your destination, which we think we are on our destination. And like Harold said, our primary destination is heaven. But then there's a lot of things on the way to enjoy to get there. It's not, I'm lost for words now. It's I should have stopped before. Yeah, it can be a lot of fun, and it's been a lot of fun for us. And we hope to have a lot of fun in the future.
Well, I guess I'm supposed to follow this. I'm trying to decide if I want to go with what Harold's got written or if I should start on my own. I'll be good. He likes his joke about, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Okay. He talked about Switzerland. Well, we went to Switzerland for our 25th anniversary. And then we went to Tanzania for our 50th. But when we went to Tanzania, I made sure I had a round trip ticket because I realized what I did when I went the first time. He could have left me there. In Europe, that was. I didn't practice this, so, okay. But by the time Harold and I met, we had already chosen our careers, and I think he mentioned that. And I was working as a nurse, and Harold was a farmer. And that was one of the things I think that made us attracted to one another. I'm going to embarrass him, but we met at a bar, and my cousin wanted me to meet Harold. And so we did. We met in the rustic. And he didn't want me to say this, but I'm going to. He told me later in life that what attracted him to me that night was I had on a dress, a skirt, and then I had high heel shoes on. And as I went back to the restroom, he decided he thought them was nice looking legs I had. Okay.
Some things never change.
Thank you. Anyway, we did make some decisions, and we talked about things, although I really wasn't thinking as we were dating. I'll be very truthful. As we were dating, we were just friends. And as we were getting close, I mean, it was coming up to Christmas, and we'd been dating about a year, and he was talking about diamond rings. And I couldn't understand why, because I had no thought of it. Seriously. I'm a slow person. And, well, that lasted until Christmas Eve and after midnight mass. And then I walked in the house with a diamond on my finger. And my mom says, next day she said, well, if you'd have told me you was going to get engaged, I wouldn't have put the fuel oil furnace in the house. So I don't know what difference that made, but anyhow. to get down to serious business. As I said, I was working as a nurse, and Harold was a farmer. And that was something that we both had in common, and it worked out very well for us. But then, you wrote this. We had the same religious beliefs. We came from families that didn't have much money. He came from a large family of 8, and I was an only child. And so, and I grew up with my mother and my grandmother because my dad died when I was 11. So as far as the social life, I really was not in with society. That's why I stutter a lot now. So after I married Harold, the whole thing changed, and that's what
I could just throw in a little joke we heard the other week. Maybe you heard about the minister. He got up one Sunday and he spoke for about 5 minutes.
You want to talk into this?
He got up and spoke for about 5 minutes, and the next Sunday he got up and he spoke for about 20. And the following Sunday he just went on for about an hour and a half, and they went up and they said, "Reverend, what happened?" He said, "Well, I got new false teeth, and that first Sunday is kind of sore, so I cut it short." He said, "The second Sunday is feeling pretty good, so I did all right." He said, "Third Sunday," he said, by mistake, I put my wife's teeth in and I couldn't shut up."
So how long are you guys planning to stay tonight? Okay, as I was saying, we came from a family that didn't have much money, so we knew what it was like to do without a lot of things. And yes, kids, we both knew what it was like to, as kids, we both knew what it was like to use the outhouse. For those of you, what an outhouse is, you might ask your grandparents. I think you got the message there. As our
In other words, no indoor plumbing.
As our relationship grew more serious, we talked about a lot of things and how we would handle them after we were married and what our main goals were that would keep our marriage going. One of the things we agreed on was that if we had a family, I would stay at home and take care of the kids. We both knew how much working as a nurse meant to me, but we felt family came first. Well, after having 4 kids in 5 years, I had plenty of work to do at home. Those were the days before the disposable diapers and automatic wash machines and dryers. But our biggest problem with having a family wasn't the work, but after our second child was born, he almost died, and that kind of changed things. At that point, the doctors then advised us for health reasons it would be best if we didn't have any more children. We didn't want to go against our Catholic faith in regards to limiting our family. So the doctor sat down with us and suggested that we might do this in a natural way. Well, it wasn't too many months till we were back at the doctor's office to tell him his ways just didn't work. Thank God our third child was born without many problems. But then we heard the same story again from the doctor. So he had made suggestions for us. Well, they didn't work out either. Then our fourth child was born. And things started out okay, and the family we started to go to natural family planning classes. We attended the classes, and I got these all right now. And needless to say, they were much more helpful than the advice the doctor gave us. So we were happy to settle for 3 boys and a girl for our family. And when you talk about family planning, it does take a lot of give and take from both sides, from the husband and the wife.
Just to follow up on that, a lot of people might see that as a negative, but I really think that's what helped strengthen our marriage, because we really had to buckle down and work together to make this work. And it isn't something that's easy, but in the long run, it pays off big dividends, and I think God has rewarded us in so many ways over the years for not giving in to going to the natural, or the unnatural, I should say, unnatural ways of family planning. So it was kind of a standard joke at that time. There was quite a few people would go to these family planning classes together, and the people that were putting it on, of course, the usual questions came up, you know, how are you supposed to be able to do this as a married couple, and so on and so forth. So one night, I think it was one of the doctors that was giving it, he said, well, if you got the urge to have sex and it's the wrong time of the month, go out in the yard and pull out the crabgrass. Well, for a while there, it was kind of a standard joke between some of our guys, some of the guys, I should say, that went to the class, and we'd see each other and said, boy, don't see any crabgrass in your lawn. You know?
But for you guys, by now, you know, lawns are treated, the crabgrass just doesn't grow, so I don't know what you're gonna do.
Yeah. So, but anyway, we, like I said, you make your plans, and no matter how well you plan ahead, and I think that's something when you talk about dating, and like Doris talked about, we talked about it as much as we could before we were married, and no matter how much you plan, there's always going to be, like Stan said, there's going to be something as you go around that curve or whatever, and like I said, I look at our life as a journey. And you know, if you plan a trip, a long trip or something, you got it all planned out. But how many times do you actually get there, especially if you're traveling by car, without having some kind of mechanical trouble or flat tire or detours or whatever? So you got to kind of be prepared for that and work your way through it. And just keep your eye on, focus to the end, which is keep your final goal is to keep your eye on God at the end of the road, and you'll be all right. Anybody else?
May I interrupt something here?
Yeah, sure.
I do think we had an experience that we were married about 20 years, 25 years, and we were prepared. We were having the family Christmas, and so the kitchen floor was scrubbed and waxed. Everything was in order. The dishes were set out for the party the next night. Well, our son was driving in, and he was going to come in the house, and Harold was working in the basement on Christmas present that Dan was not supposed to see, Dan, our son. So I ran through the kitchen, and there was a carpet in front of the refrigerator. Yeah, I did it. I stepped on the carpet, and down I went. And I couldn't get back up because I had broken my hip. That was one of the biggest things, I think, in our marriage, because it changed so many things. It changed lovemaking. It changed my positions at home for a long time. And it was something that we had not planned on. And it took a lot of, for him, it took a lot of changing, because I was used to some of the things we had to do from nursing. But he had to put my stockings on because I couldn't get down, the tight stockings in it. And those are, the only reason I'm mentioning that, it is something that we usually don't think of. I know we didn't think of anything like that. We planned on working together on the farm. And at that particular point, everything changed. And I'm not saying it to scare you, I'm just saying that did happen to us. And we're still working through some of the problems of it. So that's all I got to say.
Well, I'll just add on to that. When you talk about change in your married life, I think Stan and I both, for our first 15 or 20 years of marriage, thought we had the ideal family. We had a boy, then a girl, then a boy, then a girl. And, you know, they were good-looking kids, like their dad. And they were well-rounded kids in school. I just thought we had the world by the tail. When an issue came up, our biggest issue, was when we were probably married 15 or 20 years, about 20 years. And actually, our biggest problem is what brought us the closest together. We were always bike riders, and we were like riding bike. And we would go on bike rides together, and we'd just kind of talk about this and that and the other thing. When we had our big issue, we would talk about more things from the heart, the way we were going to get through this big problem that we had in our family.
As a team.
As a team. And I just think that cements the relationship, just like you were saying too, when a big issue comes up, you better hope you get along well together, because it can either split you apart, give you different ways to look at things, or it can bring you closer together. I remember when this issue came up, one time Stan said, I think this is what we should do. And I thought, that isn't the right way to make the decision. We followed what he suggested. It just worked out perfectly because one was able to give in, and we kind of worked together on it. So if you feel like you get along okay, like I just thought we had a good marriage, but I never thought of it as really a great marriage.
We're never tested.
We were never tested. Once you are tested and you've set that tone to make good decisions together, it can really cement a relationship. Before we were married, to tell you the truth, we were like Harold and Doris. We didn't talk about anything serious. We just talked about having fun. And that's really the way it was. I think we both thought we were going to have a big family. I come from a family of 14 kids. So I thought 10 would be a nice small number to have. And I was serious about that. Well, then when our first, I don't know if you ever agree with that. When our first son Bruce was born, I thought, well, maybe 8 would be nice. Then Jen was born, next month, well, maybe 6. Maybe we have 4. So you learn to change your mind too as you go to get a little bit wiser with your kids and things. But having your marriage tested, to me, is a good thing. I mean, it can make it much stronger and much of a more bonding thing. When I was at UD, we were required to take a certain number, I can't remember how many, philosophy courses and a certain number of religion courses. And the one religion course that everybody wanted to get into and could hardly get into until they were seniors because younger kids didn't have a chance to get into it because it was such a well-liked course, was by Father Burns. Our daughter went to UD 20, 25 years later. Father Burns was still there, and she took a course from him. But one of the side things of taking this course was you could go talk to him personally if you were engaged or dating somebody, and you could throw out the scenario between your future husband and you, and then he would give you a rating. Well, we got a B. I do remember that. Didn't get 100% because he would go through. I think there were 10 points. The background, like you guys both came from farms, so did we. So your socioeconomical background, your religion background makes a huge difference, especially if you're going to have children and when you have children. And he went through 10 points. Well, we matched on 9, which is pretty good. But having a match like that helps a marriage too if you don't work through them at least before you've married it. It's kind of important to at least make those decisions beforehand.
Well, just maybe kind of to wrap it up, like you said, some of the questions maybe as far as the difference between dating and marriage is like Emily just said, when you're dating, you tend to just look more for the fun part of it. And once you're married, you get down to serious business.
It's not fun
And a lot of times isn't really fun, maybe. But the thing is, you keep your focus on God, and whatever you do, don't give up in your faith. And no matter what issue comes up, we've had some big issues in our family life, and at times Doris and I felt like if we could just run away, and this was after our kids were grown and long left home, we still felt like we just need to escape from this whole world.
In fact, when we went to Africa for our anniversary and came home, we wished we could go back to Africa.
But I think, as we talked about it, and I know sometimes I've got some of my brothers and sisters, you think they've got the ideal family, which they really do. They've got, their kids are all close by, they come home every Saturday morning and sit around the table with their parents, and just basically the perfect life. And of course, then we get to feel sorry for ourselves, say, well, why can't we have a life like that? And then you stop to think about it, and I told her different times, I said, you know, if we wouldn't have gone through the things we did, we could not appreciate what other people are going through. So this way we could be more compassionate, more understanding, and we know that if we keep our faith in God, God is going to see us through. He will get us to our final destination as long as we just keep our faith in God. And I think that would be probably the biggest thing I could tell you tonight here is that no matter, because I can't explain, each one of you will probably run into different things throughout life. And it's just a matter of, if you're married, to sit down, work it out together the best you can, and trust in God. And a lot of times as we look back on things we thought were major problems, we think, geez, that turned out, really helped us out in our life together. And if I would just, anybody else got something they wanted to say? Emma? I would add, we talked about our anniversary. 50 years ago, we got back from Tanzania. Our associate pastor there in Ottawa is Father Alphonse. He's from Tanzania, so he took us along with him when he went home for vacation. And of course, after we got back, it was shortly after it was our 50th wedding anniversary, and he insisted we give the reflection. We don't call it the homily, but we give the reflection that night. He said, you know more about marriage than I do. And I told her after he left, I said, he was kidding one day. But anyway, we kind of got stuck doing that. And so I think we said a lot of things here tonight. We mentioned there at that homily that night. But I did end that evening with an incident that happened over in Tanzania. And it's a third world country if you're not familiar with Tanzania and Africa. Very poor country. They do have some paved roads. But one night we were supposed to stay at a place. It was a coffee plantation and a hostel combined, run by the brothers, I think of Sacred Heart of Mary, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, Father made the arrangements. He didn't know where the place was. So we got up to where we wanted to go the next day, to one of the national parks. And so Father says, we are supposed to stay here at the entrance until they come and meet us and lead us to this place. Well, we were on a paved highway, but as we started out, if you go along the roads here and you see what I call some wasteland with grass and bush, brush, and trees growing, all at once there's this little path goes down into there, and you think it ain't even wide enough for a car. So here we go. We're down there, and we're going and going, up and down, over and around, rough roads, bounce and whatnot. I thought, oh my gosh, what are we getting into? And the reason I'm telling this, because I think that just sums up the whole journey of life. You know, here we are. We're putting our full trust in that guy in the Jeep ahead of us. Where is he taking us? And I like to think of that guy in that Jeep as God. He's leading us. And if we just keep our eye on him, no matter how high the hills, how sharp the turns, or how rough the road is. But we went, and Father said too, he didn't know, maybe 5-6 miles like that. And all at once we come up to this wall, big iron gates. And to me, those were the pearly gates. They opened those gates, we drove in, the most beautiful flowers and grass, whatever you could want to see. And a young lady came out with a tray with warm, moist towels. Each one of us got a warm, moist towel to freshen up. And then they ushered us in at the door. They had a table sitting there with fruit juice, which they said later was papaya juice. So we each got a glass of juice. Then they ushered us into the main dining room area. And in the one corner, it was kind of cornered off with couches, and they had a TV, and they had popcorn and chips and soft drinks that we could munch on while they prepared the dinner. And in the meantime, one of the young ladies came in, they had a huge fireplace, and it wasn't really cold, but it was chilly. And she came in with a shovel full of hot coals, put them in the fireplace, got a nice glowing fire going. And then we sat down to a 3-course meal, and it was the kind where they came around with the bowls and put it on your plate, how much you wanted. And it, to me, I said that summed up our whole life. It was just exactly, this was heaven. I mean, after what we traveled. And Lord knows what would happen if we wouldn't have kept our eye on that Jeep ahead of us. So just think of God being in that Jeep, and don't ever give up on that focus. Just focus on God and do the best you can, and I think you'll all be all right.